G'day, Ben here from the GBT podcast. One of the most asked questions I've got after running this podcast and running the Business Brain Food podcast is, how do I podcast? I finally crumbled into all the numerous requests, and I'm going to give you a tour of my podcasting setup just so you can see how I go about creating my show. So let's start with the mixer, and then I'll talk about what goes into the mixer and when it comes out of the mixer, where does it go. This mixer here is an Allen & Heath Z14. You can use pretty much any mixer you like. The reason I like this mixer is because it has 4 what's called auxiliary channels. So I don't know if you can see that clearly there, but these are what's called auxiliary channels. Now the benefit of that is if you're going to have guests on your show using Skype or the telephone, you need to do what's called a mix minus. Now that's a technical sounding term, but if you have a look for example at this auxiliary 4, you'll see that this channel here is on 0, and the reason for that, if you come down, is that is Skype aux 4, and what that means is that I'm not sending the caller back to themselves, so they're not hearing a wicked echo. Now if we go back to this one here, which is aux 1, which is for the phone, and we go up to number 1, you'll see 1 is on 0, which means that if I have somebody on the phone, I'm not sending them back to themselves. So this mixer, whilst it looks very complicated, once you've got it set up, it's very simple. I bought this one for about $600 or $700. They're not expensive, and it does everything that I need. It's sort of the heart of the operation when it comes to recording, so that's how the mixer works. Now let's have a look at the different inputs coming into the mixer. Now of course the heart of any podcast or anything that's audio is going to be the microphones, and so I want to show you what microphone I use, what I started with, just to give you an idea what you can use or what you can start with, because there's plenty of options. So the microphone that I'm currently using is this one here. It's called a Shure SM7B. Probably the thing to note more than anything is this is what's called a dynamic microphone. And a dynamic microphone means that it picks up noise from directly in front of the microphone, so from here, rather than all around. Now you may have seen those microphones other broadcasters use. They're called a condenser microphone. They have a really nice rich sound, but the downside of them is they pick up a lot of noise. Now my studio is actually in my office, and you can see my office has an awful large amount of glass. So what I do is I actually get right up close on the microphone when I'm recording, don't have the levels too high, so it's only picking up my voice. Now that's like a $600 or $700 microphone. You don't need to go to that trouble. You could use something like this. This is a much more affordable microphone. Is a Shure SM58. There we go. Now this particular microphone has been used for years and years by vocalists and by bands for live performances, and you can pick one of these up, I don't know, for about maybe $150, $200, so a much cheaper microphone, but does the job. You can even go to a lower level than this. You could go to a thing called a ATR 2100. It is made by a company called Audio Technica, I think. It has a USB plug as well, so you can go directly into a computer, or you can use one of these microphone cables, which is what's called a balanced output, depending on what you want, and you get those for about $80. So there's 3 very good options for you, from $80 right through to $600. Now if you are using something like this here, the Shure SM7B, you need to give it a little bit of help. This is called a cloud lifter, and this device here increases the level coming out of the microphone into the mixer and gives me a much warmer sound, and that was, I don't know what that was, maybe $150 or $200 for that little device there. It's called a mic activator. Now one of the other common questions I get is, how do I get the audio of callers into the mixer? I have this attachment here on mine, so it's right about here that my audio actually stopped working, ironically. However, I use this Logitech USB adapter. It's just an interface. You can see the 2 cables coming out of it here, and that plugs into my USB attachment to my MacBook here, and it just comes up as an input source, and I use that for my Skype. And then I use the audio headphone jack, which is an audio in and out on a Mac, for music or sounds coming out of the laptop into the mixer. So I just simply plug this plug in here. Runs audio out, and that's what the difference is here, where you see Skype and music. The Skype is coming out of the Logitech connection, and the music is coming directly out of the headphone socket. And that's how I bring audio out of my laptop. Now what about phone calls? Because that's one of the things people have quite often asked, is how do I get people from the telephone to my recording? Well, I use this little device here, which is just an adapter. That's all it is. and you take the plug out of the bottom of the handset, you plug it into this adapter like so, and then when you make a call you just pull the handset off as you would normally, and now it's all going through that adapter. And that adapter, as you can see, well, you may not be able to, has two cables coming off the back. My audio goes out through this cable here to the telephone, and then the caller's audio comes into the mixer here, which is this particular line here. Now the beautiful thing about having a mixer like this is that we have full EQ. We have the lows, low mids, high mids, and then highs, and that allows me to really control the sound when you're talking to people on podcasts. Getting the sound right to me is pretty important. The next part that confuses people sometimes is how do we get audio onto our podcast. Now this is a program called Soundbite, and it just plays on the Mac, and I'll unplug the audio cable over here for a second so we can get the audio straight out of the Mac. And I like to add my sound live as I'm doing the podcast because it's easier. It means that no one has to do it in post-production. And this little thing's just it's called a sound card. And as you can see, there's numbers and there's letters, or you can click with your mouse. And by just clicking, I can click that. There's my intro music.
Welcome to the business podcast that gives you direct access.
So just by clicking the relevant button, you can have things like music, you can have sound effects like this. So you can have all sorts of things, you know, that...
And now, something quirky.
You can have all sorts of audio, and you just click on it, and I just clicked on the applaud one there. I'll stop that one. Get rid of it. You know, it could be something like this. Okay, so it just allows you to play music and sounds by the click of a button. Now, once I've got all of that going into this mixer, the next thing is to record it. And I know a lot of people use their MacBooks or their laptops to record. I'm a bit scared to rely on a computer to record anything more than a few minutes of audio. So I use a dedicated audio recorder. This is the Zoom H5, and as you can see, I have my audio going in there. This other cable over here is just power. And this is a relatively new recorder for me. Before this, I had a Zoom H2, but it broke. So this is the new recorder, and it does a great job. All the audio goes into there. It has an SD card slot in the side, and so everything gets saved onto an SD card, and then, you know, we upload the audio recordings into a Dropbox folder, and then our audio editing team grab those files and turn it into something special. And now for the secret sauce. I'm going to show you, you know, I sort of showed you how we get the sound into the system, how we use the mixer, and how we record it. And, you know, we have this broadcast quality going on. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is definitely this microphone. This microphone is a powerhouse. Like I said, you don't need to spend that kind of money, and you know, per $100 you don't see that big an increase. So I would suggest going with something like that SM58. But here's my little secret sauce, and this is called a compressor limiter. Okay, this one here is made by Behringer, and what it does is allows you to limit sound, the levels. So if somebody laughs or yells or, you know, is very loud, it won't let it be too loud, and the same token, it won't let it be too soft. So it sort of equalizes the sound, if you like, or normalizes it. The other thing it does is it has a noise gate on it. So if you're not talking, let's say I have you on the phone and it's a staticky line, if you're not talking, it'll actually close the gate and not let any noise through at all. When you go over a certain decibel or a certain volume, it'll open the gate up, and that way I can hear you talking. But at least that way, when you're not talking, the hiss is not there, and that is on all my main devices. So if you have a look at here on the top, it's my microphone, it's the telephone, and it's Skype. The one in the middle, I can't remember what it's set for. Probably it could be a line in from the PC or something, but anyway, that's sort of the secret sauce, and that was a few $100s, but it makes a huge difference to the quality. So there you go. That's sort of my setup. You know, you can sort of see I've got my video camera there for when I do my YouTube videos, dual screens. But that's the podcasting setup, gang. Gives you a good idea of how it all comes together here in this studio and what it is we do. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share, let other people know about it, and if you've got a question, leave it down in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer it.